Thank you very much, Johanna, and I'd like to thank everybody at the Global Quran for this invitation, and everybody for attending, and the presenters for enlightening us with their methodologies. Maybe I should spare you the trouble by sharing my own presentation. All right, let me share the screen and see. Okay, sorry about this, but okay. Well, is the presentation on? Should be. All right. So basically, my translation is called, and now it's called the Grand Qur'an, whereas previously is to be called the Luminous Qur'an, when it was only for 4 ajza of the Qur'an. Now it's for 10, and I've already gone through 14 parts of the Qur'an, and hopefully shortly I'll be translating, the first half of the Qur'an, inshallah. And it's, subtitled, a faithful rendition and annotated translation of the message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Please also notice that I use the water metaphor throughout my presentation, just, so that you may notice the language I use in my presentation. There. Okay. So basically, whoever tries to start off a new project in Quran translation needs to be aware of the great flow of the current of English translations, which stretches over almost 4 centuries, dating back to Alexander Ross's 1649 translation, and the sweeping trappings and imprints of the times in which these were actually produced. They carry out all these imprints in their translations. Most importantly, very recently, the 9/11 attacks was considered to be a game changer that affected how people approach the Quran and read it. Thus, most of the well-known Quran translations that came after it, which constitutes a sizable portion of the English Quran translations that were ever produced, were attuned to the needs of the time and addressed them, but some to the extent of outright intervention. And the apologetic note that was brought out earlier in the today's presentations, and the translator's awareness of the intellectual needs and baggage of the readers, i.e., the context of reception, which is dynamic to say the least, is paramount. These have got to be somehow addressed in the translation. Although Muslim other relationships, issues of the 21st century, women and the penal code, which has also has been brought up a number of times throughout today's presentations, are also meant to be addressed rationally, but neither need it be bigoted nor apologetic. In my translation, I'm very aware that when you open the Quran and turn its pages, you are not simply opening up a book, but you are literally plunging into a seething sea. Engagement with the Arabic is totally different from that of its translation. Sound plays a major role in the former, i.e. in the Arabic, while meaning, not sound, has the pride of place in the latter. This is not to say that meaning is not part of the former. Far from it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala يقول مثانية تقشعر منه جلود الذين آمنوا. Their skins crawl, but that at least the sound is inevitably foregone in the translation or lost in translation. This skin crawling effect or feel does not come across. Now, the question that arises, how much of the original can we salvage through translation, especially when the major Quran translation practices are skewed and that is practice is not supported by theory and research. The imagery of engagement through translation is very potent. Translation is not by default wandering in shallow waters, but could retain a taste of the original beyond the basic meaning that all has got to understand, and start a process of contemplation, i.e. tadabbur. Thus, my translation is meant to be faithful, not too literal, not unduly free. Bracketing has been judiciously used to ensure the smoothness and understandability of the flow of the text. They are not to be intrusive, giving the feeling that they are out of place, nor superimposing the translator's own views or interpretational preferences, however possible. The openness of the text for interpretational alternatives is meant to be preserved. I have done my utmost best to make my translation as reflective of the original as humanly possible. In the process, neither were extraneous readings juxtaposed with the original words, nor were any personal or ideational aberrations superimposed in the rendition at hand. My thoughts, if any, are kept in the annotations. This obviously made my task all the more difficult, yet all the more satisfying. Another aspect of my translation deals with the deplorable but pervasive practice of what I call listed Quran translations, which show the Quranic ayahs as a list. And given the post 9/11 tide of active engagement with the Quran, these are simply not fit for the times. Quranic ayahs do not appear in Arabic as a list, but they are in most translations. This helps only to bolster the major misconception that the Quran is disjointed and incoherent. Thematic unity in the Quran is interlacing through repetition of themes and lexical items, either locally in the surah or universally throughout the Quran, had to be brought out and highlighted. In my translations, I try to bring out relevance in the Quran through providing a contextualized reading vis-a-vis the circumstances of revelation, which would enable us to get closer to each surah's general theme and key for uncloaking its meaning potential. Thus, I deemed introductions to the surahs as very critical indeed. In these, I mean to preempt the question of skeptics about the rationality of the Quran, its cohesion and coherence, further highlighted through the measures that I shall be enumerating shortly. Is the surah a composite whole, or is it an amalgam of disjointed snippets that popped into the mind of the Prophet? Is there ever a central theme to the surah? What is the key of understanding it? I did my best to lull these nagging questions, so please tell me frankly if I failed there. Note also that in the footnotes, some ayahs, particularly thematically united passages, I make reference to the key of the surah and answer the questions that might pop up during later reading of the surah. So I strove to achieve connectivity and thematic unity in the translation through giving the overall theme and key of the surah, thematically grouping ayahs in related units, unobtrusive ayah numbering, and judiciously using punctuation to highlight the intended meaning and indicate the connection between the ayahs. All these are hopefully meant to make the reader appreciate the cohesion and coherence of the message. Besides these, I made sure that these are highlighted. I mean, the connectivity is highlighted through one bundling up thematically related chunks. Unlike many available translations, this one does not treat Quranic poses, al-fawasil al-Qur'aniyya, which are phonic in nature and most readily lost in translation, as definitive in relaying the meaning, thus arranging the ayahs in lists rather than grouping them together in meaningful units. The relevance, munasaba of the ayahs to each other and the semantic units of each unit is not passed by without being pointed out clearly. I'm also mostly concerned with the deep context-bound meaning of the ayah. I feel strongly that an ayah is only understood and can be safely decoded within its particular context and context. Otherwise, the reading would be perplexed and raises more questions than it answers. Needless to say that ilm al-munasaba helps here, but some instances just escaped the notice of earlier scholars. Thirdly, I deal with what I call tafsir permeated translations, where the interpretive tafsir is superimposed on the representative translation and could be mistaken for it. What is most irking with just an approach is that they only help to make the reader further removed from the original. Simplistic translations, which give the false impression that what is there in the left column, hand column, is sufficient enough representation of what is on the right-hand column, do not address the intellectual hunger of the readers and leave them with more questions. So I use annotations to supplement the reading, providing the referent of what's being pointed at, shedding more light on meaning by cross-referencing ayahs, providing explanatory prophetic hadiths, further explaining the meaning and expounding on it, and at times I provide insightful thoughts that further understanding and open up the door to contemplation. Notes are also well documented and rely on the most respected sources of exegesis. Although I intervene as much as choosing what I deem to be the best reading from a wide variety of time-honored Quranic explanations. And I do not make this presumptuous claim that any of the annotations is totally mine. Although my translation represents a safe, mainstream, non-restrictive understanding of the message of the Quran, the great wealth of Quranic commentary that we have inherited through millennia of scholarship, hard study, and contemplation is considered with empathy and careful attention. This weighty inheritance is a boon to be consulted with great respect, not a bane bearing the trappings of times of old, which some would consider as unbefitting to modern day thought patterns. As you read through the translation, you will surely come to realize this and hopefully appreciate the work of these great scholars of Islam. A few final notes about my translation. Although this translation is meant to be a safe of sound aqidah and mainstream, it is also meant to be non-restrictive and unwarrantedly alienating the less dogmatic segments of the Muslim community. Every care was taken to make each ayah's rendition read as a composite whole, i.e. understood independently of its notes, To achieve this aim, given the peculiarity of the diction of the Quran, which is at times elliptical and terse, one had to include explanatory brackets in the body of the text itself, but tried to keep them as minimal and unobtrusive as possible. Key Quranic themes like those of belief, iman, denial, kufr, the worldly life, al-hayat al-dunya, and the hereafter, al-hayat al-akhirah, paradise, al-jannah, and hellfire, al-nar, and mindfulness, taqwa, are discussed in the footnotes, being the pivotal concept that they had to be explained clearly to the readers. Given that the language of the translation must try to reflect some of the grandness of the language of the Quran, the translation is in modern day non-banal idiomatic education English. It further minimally employs some of well-known stylistic features found in many a well-respected Quran translation, which some would consider being archaic. The overall language is easy to understand to a reader of an appropriate educational background. I also attempted to Islamize English using semantically non-charged, transparent English lexical items for some Islamic terminology. I use sign for ayah, prayer for salah, and pilgrimage for hajj, belief for iman, denial for kufr. But I keep the caps to draw attention to their usage beyond that of the everyday or the restrictedly linguistic, doing without the italics and the critics of some common terms for which there are no English equivalents, like that of surah and ayah, use of the westernized names for Allah as God and those of the prophets only in my prefatory notes, i.e. in the annotations. Without I just hope that I said enough. But finally, I would like to say that any translator who doesn't stand on the shoulders of giants, Quran commentators, translators, researchers in Quran translation, would not see any further than they did. And finally, I would like to thank my team of editors, Dr. Susan Thackeray, Dr. Okfad Jaba, and Ms. Helen Dyer, and revisers and consultants, and also especially the Quran Center in Aligra University, and also to the Department of Languages and Translation at Taiba University. I'm available on these addresses, academia, my email, as well as you'll find the link down there to download the translation. Thank you very much.